What's up guys, also Footballtalk here. Week 2 of our divisional draft and roster review series is here, and we move on to the Eastern divisions as we hop back and forth between the two conferences. What I do in this collection of videos is spend some time discussing the draft classes of all 32 teams, running through each individual player, giving short scouting reports on them, discussing what the depth chart currently looks like, the intended role of that player, and how well they fit in, along with some of my overall beliefs for each franchise's approach to roster construction. I'll share my thoughts on these classes as a whole at the end of each team, and then to wrap up the video, I'll do a quick ranking of how I believe they did, all things considered, within that division. I've watched all but like 20 players who ultimately got selected, and I'll try to give some good insight as it relates to how those guys fit within their new team. If you want to dive even deeper into some individual guys here, I have scouting reports on nearly 140 prospects, along with a big draft recap, and a piece on the biggest impact on drafted free agents over on my site hellofootballtalk.com. One more note here, if you enjoy the content, please let me know by smashing that like button, as the kids like to say these days, and subscribing for more of these, really appreciate that. Not wanting to waste any more of your time now, however, let's get into the NFC East here, kicking things off with the reigning division champs, the Dallas Cowboys, who in the first round, 29th overall, selected Tyler Guyton, offensive tackle Oklahoma, second round 56th overall Marshawn Leland, edge defender at Western Michigan, third round 73rd overall Cooper Beebe, interior offensive lineman Kansas State, and then later in the third 87th overall Maris Leofau, linebacker Notre Dame, 5th round 174th overall Kalen Carson, cornerback Wake Forest, a couple of 6th rounders 216th overall Ryan Flournoy, wide receiver Southeast Missouri State, and 233rd overall Nathan Thomas, the offensive tackle / interior O-lineman out of Louisiana, and then finally in the 7th round 244th overall Justin Rogers, interior defensive lineman out of Auburn. For Guyton here at the top, not wanting to be too negative to start here, but I personally looked at him as more of a mid-second rounder because his balance generally and how high placed that leads to issues, whether it's centering blocks in the run game or sitting in a stance approaching the contact phase in passing situations, where he tries making up for getting too tall by widening his base, and that also makes him vulnerable to some lateral movement. That I didn't love what I saw in that regard. But obviously I recognize the talent at 6'8", 320 pounds with the raw force in his hands and the ability to still get the job done with subpar technique at times. He has some dominant reps on tape and consistently provides excellent leg drive when his hands are connected, as well as engulfing linebackers and wraparounds of GT power. And with his long arms, the ability to realign his feet and find anchor points, he has room for error as a pass protector, which led to low pressure numbers to his name. So while I did prefer Arizona's Jordan Morgan, who ultimately went 4 picks earlier to the Packers, with Guyton as my OT8, which a lot of people had the other way around, and they could have just stuck at 23 to get Morgan, but I did like that they moved back 6 slots here and added the 3rd rounder, which I'll get to in a minute as they doubled down on the O-line, while they threw in the 7th round the next year. This was really about how each team graded the high-end reps, versus the lack of consistency in his game at this point, which isn't optimal considering Dallas probably needs Guyton to flip sides, and therefore keep Tyler Smith at left guard, which I do think is the right thing to keep an all-pro at his best spot, but it could lead to some rough moments for the rookie early on, for a team that is all in and needs him to lock down the blind side right away. They came back in the second and selected another toolsy player on the edge defensively now, in Marshawn Leland from Western Michigan, long muscle build at 6'3", 265 pounds with 34.5-inch arms, who just bullied tight ends when he lined up on the strong side. Super active player, non-aligned blockers to get to his place at shoulder trying to reach him, or pulling guards to bump him off his spot, disengaging and creating tackles in the run game. While as a pass rusher, he offers an intriguing combination of flexibility and power to crash from one shoulder of tackles, but can also stop the feet of blockers by giving them a little shake, and then get underneath the chest with great leverage. Overall, he doesn't seem to have the greatest play recognition, and can lose track of the ball and misdirection stuff at times, and the connection between his upper and lower body to execute moves to full effect, combined with his hand placement, need work, as you see him lose his balance too often at this point. Impressive all-around athlete who plays really hard and has legit flashes on tape, while I really like how efficient he was with his rush tracks during one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl, instead of trying to land crazy moves in that setting. Dorrance Armstrong followed his former defensive coordinator Dan Quinn to Washington. They didn't extend their relationship with Dante Fowler as a rotational rusher, so now they re-established their depth up front to rotate bodies through behind Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence, along with another 2nd rounder from a couple of years ago in Sam Williams, right in line with where I valued him, and I thought he could have gone even earlier, so I like this a lot more. And then I loved Cooper Beebe, the Kansas State guard, for a long time now, built like a brick wall with massive legs, jolt in his hands, and great leg drive upwards through targets. Whether he's riding guys off the landmarks and angular blocks, riding big men into the laps of linebackers and double teams, or burying moving targets as a puller. For his large build, however, BB's quick into his pass sets, regularly is first to establish meaningful contact with his stout lower half and strong grip to lock up interior rushers. He doesn't have the lightest feet and fairly short arms at 31.5 inches. I thought he wasn't a great fit for a system that runs a lot of wide zone, and he's going to be challenged more laterally by twitchy guys on the inside who throw out counter moves against him. But one of my favorite offensive linemen to watch over the last 3 years, who got even better once he slid inside from left tackle. He tested better than I anticipated, and would have immediately boosted the run game of nearly any team in the league. The question with Dallas now is, because they already have 2 all-pro level guards, if BB can move to center and immediately contribute over Brock Hoffman. If Guyton isn't ready and they do move Tyler Smith back out to tackle, while BB steps in for him, or at least he's a premier backup, who might ultimately replace Zach Martin once he finally drops off from the insane level of consistency that he's not had for a decade in the league. The other third rounder, Notre Dame linebacker Maris Leofau, who I talked about as a reach in my big draft recap, gets himself trapped behind blockers and lose vision on the ball carrier at times, while not yet using his length optimally to keep blockers at bay. Regularly overshoots his target a little bit when closing out to completions in the flats, and overall his tackling in space has been a concern throughout his college career, missing nearly 16% of his total attempts. He does have impressive lateral movement skills tracking zone concepts, and when he opens up the chase plays, he can really run. He squares up his targets in man coverage and has plenty of pop in his hands to take charge of those reps, while as a blitzer he times up the snap count well, packs the suddenness to crossface blockers, but will also happily crash into guys in his path. So there's a lot to like in terms of the physical profile, but this is by no means a finished product, or a team that has gotten run over by the better rushing teams in football because they're small and guys don't trust their eyes. I don't see Leofau fix that issue, and they may go to more base sets because this guy can play man coverage on tight ends instead of subbing on another safety. So maybe that's kind of the justification here, that you want to be in those bigger packages. But not only did I have several linebackers ranked ahead of this guy, but this also comes with the opportunity cost of not taking a running back here. Jerry Jones was yapping about Jonathan Brooks from Texas. They got jumped in round 2, and then they didn't even take Marshall Lloyd from USC here, who I talked about last week that I really liked for the Packers, and they took him the very next pick. So he may rush for 100 yards in a playoff game at Dallas a couple of years from now, as the next in line in that tradition of Packers running backs. I'll be a lot quicker with the day 3 guys here, because I think they're pretty easy to describe. Keelan Carson from Wake Forest, outside corner with good size at 6 foot 195 pounds, quick feet and long arms to mirror off the line with good route anticipation skills, manages that space to receivers in off-zone assignments with a good understanding for route combinations and how he can get himself involved, and missed less than 9% of his attempted tackles in his career. He'll have to adjust his style of play to some degree, as he just sort of catches receivers downfield a lot of times. Not totally sure if he should play the ball or the man when he has his back turned to the quarterback, and has some bad moments of getting too aggressive shooting on hill against completions in front of him, but teams will test him with those quick hitters. Better fit in a zone heavy system, I thought, but behind the starting trio they didn't have a whole lot, with Nashawn Wright as a long press corner they got in the middle rounds a couple of years ago. I'll be interested to see how much Mike Zimmer adapts to the meta of modern defenses, and if we see them transition to some degree here to more of a match zone system. Then in the 6th, the Southeast Missouri State wide receiver Ryan Flournoy. Intriguing physical makeup for a small school receiver at 6'1", 205 pounds with mid-4 speed, which he consistently uses to threaten off the line and create separation as he breaks off routes. Didn't face a lot of press in college, but at the Senior Bowl he saw some violent feet and strong hands to swipe away press attempts. Always friendly to the quarterback with the way he breaks off his routes, only dropped 1 of 58 catchable passes last season, and efficient after the catch, getting vertical and landing stiff arms. There's too much wasted movement in his routes at this point, with sloppy footwork and exaggerated body action. Needs to work on his ability to alter speeds and set up breaks optimally. Doesn't always attack the ball at its earliest window, and will have to adjust to more physical cover guys in the NFL as a 25-year-old rookie who's torn the same ACL twice already. But definitely a shot worth taking late in the 6th round, when you're already asking Jalen Tolbert to step up as a wide receiver 3, with Quante Turpin as the only notable guy behind that, who's the primary return specialist and not really somebody you want to have out there running routes. The other 6th rounder, Nathan Thomas from Louisiana, very much in the mold of Robert Hunt, who was also a standout tackle at Louisiana and moved inside to guard for the Dolphins before receiving a massive contract by Minnesota this offseason. 6'5", 330 pounds with a ton of natural force and ability to steer defenders off the space in the run game. wants to start a cage fight as a pass protector, with impressive flexion and ankle strength to hold his own. But Thomas leads way too much with his helmet into contact in the run game and regularly slips off blocks. Heavy, rather slow feet create issues when left on an island in pass pro, which makes a move to guard inevitable, where he has those bumpers next to him, and at this point heavily relies on his natural strength to get the job done. If Cooper Beebe wins the starting gig at center outright, you're looking at Hoffman as your primary backup there, while names like Asim Richards and TJ Bass are second in line for those guard spots, so a solid chance to take here. And finally, Justin Rogers, the big nose tackle from Auburn, unfortunately one of the least inspiring players I've watched on tape this draft cycle. Big immovable object on the interior, with that sawed-up build but 33-inch arms, and you see a few moments of work in the depth of the pocket with his force, but very little range to actually make plays in the run game. There's nothing to what he does against the pass other than the bull rush, and watching his pursuit of the ball outside his vicinity is almost laughably poor. So yeah, for a team that didn't bring back veteran Jonathan Hankins, and now ask Mazi Smith in his second year to put weight back on as a shade nose, maybe Rogers can give you a few snaps of just holding his ground for an undersized front. But I didn't love what the Cowboys did here. Guyton in the first, they did trade back for, but still I was just low on because I think he's pretty damn raw. Leofar was way early for me, and I think he's set up to struggle if they ask him to step in as a starter. I did like Nealon and Beebe as the other day 2 selections, and think they can be starters in 2025, who give that team a level of physicality that they might have lost here at some point when you look at the play of exits. Solid shots to take on day 3, but I'm not blown away by anything, or thoughts that they got any steals here. And then of course, not drafting a running back in what I thought was an underrated class, when they had several opportunities to do so, before signing back Zeke, kind of in the all-in sense of getting back with the X when you were right to move on in the first place. Nothing egregiously bad, but this entire offseason has been fairly underwhelming for a team that desperately wants that glory hole of finally getting back to the Super Bowl. That however brings us to the New York Giants, who only made 6 selections, first round 6th overall Malik Neighbors, wide receiver LSU, second round 47th overall Tyler Nubin, safety Minnesota, third round 70th overall Andrew Phillips, cornerback Kentucky, 4th round 107th overall Theo Johnson, tight end Penn State, 5th round 166th overall Tyrone Tracy Jr., running back out of Purdue, and then in the 6th round 183rd overall Darius Musow, linebacker UCLA. Starting things off with LSU superstar receiver Malik Neighbors, my number 3 overall prospect, and I believe the top receiver in the majority of drafts that don't include Marvin Harrison Jr. Elite mover for any position when it comes to the combination of flexibility, explosiveness to start and stop, where he's able to snap off routes or blow by DBs after luring them into feeling safe as he hits that extra gear, special body control and the ability to play above his weight as he comes up with contested catches, hangs up in the air or tiptoes the sideline. And then he's a nightmare with the ball in his hands, effortlessly speeding up or down, hitting dynamic moves to make us miss in the open field, and being a threat to take a simple crosser all the way to the house on any given play. Every once in a while we'll have a focus drop where he takes his eyes off the ball a little early because he wants to create explosives, and operated mainly out of the slot last season with a pretty basic route tree, where we saw him get hung up on contact or slip more than you'd like to see the few times that he was challenged and actually put outside. So the Giants already had a deep core of slot receivers, and you could have made an argument for Rome Odunze out of Washington as a better complement to the guys there, but Big Blue desperately needed that dynamic weapon on offense that they haven't had outside of Saquon Barkley pretty much since they traded another former LSU star receiver in Odell Beckham Jr. There was a lot of noise around the Giants, maybe even moving up for a quarterback like Drake May out of UNC, but instead they got Daniel Jones a premier weapon to give that experiment with him and their coaching staff one more year. Tyler Nubin from Minnesota was my number 1 safety, and someone I thought was being underrated, along with pretty much all of the safety class altogether. Brings solid size with experience playing the high post, but also plenty of time in the box, where he operates with good urgency against the run generally. His instincts playing deep, the ability to track the quarterback's eyes, to make plays on the ball or dislodge it from the target, extend his range beyond his time speed, and I like what I saw from him when flexed out against tight ends in man coverage, dictating reps with his hands from off alignment with the appropriate level of quicks and confidence. He did run a 4.59 at his pro day, and lacks the makeup burst where if he's out of phase in isolated situations to still re-enter the picture, and while he was an effective tackler in college, NFL athletes may be able to slip off more of his loose wraps as he's just tripping up ball carriers at times. Nevertheless, I thought this guy fits really well with what the modern game asks of him, and as Shane Bowen comes over from Tennessee, I expect him to run a wide Rolodex of coverages where Nubin's smarts, instinct and spatial awareness can really shine. He has the ball magnet quality to him, And for a defense that just lost Xavier McKinney without a lot of proven commodities in that secondary, I think this is an excellent addition. Newbin will most likely start next to Jason Pinnock, while another day 2 pick from a year ago in Dane Belton is a third safety and big nickel. And he kept investing into the secondary with Andrew Phillips, the Kentucky cornerback, very balanced in his stance, being locked onto the hips of his man, counters the stem of the route, and then quickly redirects forward if guys get him to open up. Love the way he caps over routes and match zone assignments, not being worried about getting run by, and closing that gap to receivers with explosive plant and drive ability. And you love his ferocious mindset to get downhill against the run, as well as in the screen game, where he doesn't care about guys being in his path, or if he's the smaller party of the collision. He accumulated very little ball production, without a single interception during his time at Kentucky, while he maybe looked as more of a nickel with limited long speed by some teams, and he simply gets too far over his skis, not breaking down and finishing tackles at a high enough rate, leading to him missing about 20% of his attempts. But I don't think that has anything to do with his level of investment or unwillingness to improve in that area, so how quickly he can do so will be big to determine how effective he can be right away. For this Giants team that has been competing with Cordell Flott and Nick McLeod, I think he'll be the best option to start alongside Deonte Banks. If he doesn't jump in at nickel where Darnell Holmes is another option, to me he can be a valuable asset in a diverse coverage scheme if he just learns to bring people to the ground more regularly. They started off day 3 by getting Theo Johnson from Penn State, super athletic tight end at 6'6", 260 pounds, who nearly had a perfect relative athletic score with his combine performance, which you see in the burst coming out of his breaks, as well as turning up the field once he catches the pass. Good hand-eye coordination and big hands to swallow the ball, with the frame to box out and wing through contact, and while he still has room to grow, he generally displayed good fundamentals and an impressive ability to roll his hips through contact in a pro-style rushing attack at Penn State. The production never quite lived up to his athletic profile, and he didn't look very confident as a run runner to actually make full use of it, while lacking creativity with the ball in his hands if he can't just run away or through someone. But I thought he had a chance to be the second talent off the board because of the intrigue with that insane combine that he had after already being named the national team's talent of the week at the Senior Bowl. Darren Waller still up in the air if he ends up retiring, and it seems more likely at this point than not. You have a more traditional Y in Daniel Bellinger to really take some stuff off the rookie's plate in the run game. This makes a lot of sense here early in day 3 to take a shot like that. Then in the 5th round, Purdue running back Tyrone Tracy, absolute steal at a position where they needed to replace a franchise star in Saquon Barkley. The background as a receiver does show up in the lack of refinement in terms of vision and decision making as a runner, and pass protection is still a work in progress with him, understanding his role, finding the right level of urgency, and taking charge of blitzers, but he is a natural runner who already showed quick growth and has an innate feel for how to get defenders leaning towards the wrong side of blocks. His outstanding curvilinear movements, body control, pace alteration, and the skills of a return specialist to make stuff happen in the open field. And then you see the soft hands, route running acumen coming out of the backfield, and what he can do with it once he catches the ball in space. No shade towards Devin Singletary, who has always performed above his level of expectation in the NFL and took over Houston's backfield last season before getting quite a substantial contract with the Giants this year, or Eric Gray, who I really liked coming out of Oklahoma a couple of years ago, but this now is the most talented back on the Giants. I'm not sure how early he sees the field other than the package play on offense early on, but I think he returns both kicks and punts for this team right away, and once the coaches see his skills in live action, they'll be hard-pressed not feature him more extensively on offense as well. And the last pick, UCLA linebacker Darius Mursau, rugged physical linebacker with good contact balance and uses his hands like a pass rusher in the way that he navigates around blocking if he has space. Good understanding for how to adjust his width and depth of his drops in zone coverage, according to the pass concept, along with the communication skills to deny easy completions, and can go around or through running backs as a blitzer. Too eager to charge into linemen and take himself out of potential cutback tracks, lacks dynamic burst to run down plays out of his range or take advantage of vacant rush lanes, while not getting clean contact in ball carriers at a high enough rate. So I think this is a guy who they prioritized over some of the other defensive players with high potential, because he's made for the new kickoff rules, where he can evade blocks in more condensed space, along with adding competition to a linebacker room that has a bunch of these day 3 draft picks. So as I look at this Giants class as a whole, I really like what they were able to accomplish here. They get the superstar weapon Neighbors at the top, my top ranked safety in the middle of the second in Newbin, who I think starts week 1 for them. Whether he lands up inside or out, the guy can be a quality starter if he just cleans up his tackling. Andrew Phillips, one of the most athletic tight ends in combine history, who could have easily gone like 50 picks higher, my number 8 running back all the way in the 5th round, and a guy profiles as a quality special team at the end, I think that's about as good as you can do if you just stick and pick the top guys available while still addressing areas of need. How much all of this matters for the current coaching staff will be determined by how much Daniel Jones can bounce back, now with a legit game breaker they can flip the ball to, which we'll know depending on if Neighbors actually learns his quarterback's name. Big season for Big Blue, but I think they set themselves up very well with the class that they were able to assemble here. Team 3 now, the Philadelphia Eagles, who in the first round 22nd overall selected Quinion Mitchell, cornerback Toledo, second round 40th overall Cooper DeJean, another cornerback / safety out of Iowa, third round 94th overall Jalix Hunt, edge out of Houston Christian, fourth round 127th overall Will Shipley, running back Clemson, then 3 5th rounders, Anaya Smith, wide receiver Texas A&M, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., linebacker Clemson, and Trevor Keegan, interior offensive lineman Michigan, and then 2 more 6th rounders, 185th overall Johnny Wilson, wide receiver Florida State, and 5 picks later Dylan McMahon, interior offensive lineman NC State. Starting off with Mitchell from Toledo, consensus CB1, and somebody who had a chance to be the first defender off the board, yet Philly doesn't have to move at all to get him at 22nd overall. Does a great job of anticipating and reading routes by the guy across from him and not needing any change in tempo as such, with the light feet to react accordingly, finding the optimal balance between keying the quarterback's drop and being aware of targets in his vicinity in order to click and close on routes. And then he's just been on an astronomical rise this entire pre-draft season to make you feel great about the tape and ball production that he had, running a 4.33 and absolutely shutting down some of the top receivers in the country at the Senior Bowl. Doesn't always attack downhill in the run or screen game, I'd say, and he has almost no experience in press coverage in terms of timing his strikes to disrupt receivers, but he did play soft press a lot during the All-Star week and showed no issues matching routes off the line. To go with the football IQ to decipher route patterns in zone, the foot quickness to be confident in isolated situations, the ball skills, it's all top tier and worthy of being a top 10 pick in many other years. I think he immediately is the top corner as part of an aging room in Philly, with Darius Slay and James Bradbury's contracts becoming more of a hindrance at this point, while Avonte Maddox was brought back for another year, and I think Mitchell has legit all-pro potential in the long run. Philly didn't stop addressing the secondary there, however, as they moved up 10 spots in the second round to secure themselves what was projected to be a pick in the 20s with Cooper DeJean, the versatile defensive back from Iowa. I'll talk about this with Washington, who they made the deal with, how they actually won the trade on paper, with Philly moving down 25 spots from 53rd overall in exchange here, but a totally defensible move if you valid this guy as somebody who could have easily been a first rounder. A lot of the same things I just discussed with Mitchell ring true here as well, understanding where his landmarks are in zone coverage, the eye discipline, how he midpoints routes, and puts himself in position to get his hands on the ball. Calm in his backpedal and off-man coverage, and can be physical with widening the stem of routes when asked to play closer up. Unlike some people may think because he's wide, where he can run with just about anybody and quickly shut down yards after catch opportunities. And then wherever you line him up, that ability to take care of his assignments in the run game, win the face of contact with blockers, and bring us to the ground is outstanding. Not the quickest feet or twitch his playstyle to redirect and isolate coverage reps, and savvy route runners able to attack his blind spots, taking control in the situations, which is why I always preferred him playing the nickel, and now you don't need an extra big package where he's sub on a safety playing in that slot role. I think DeJean can play on the perimeter, but his strengths would really be enhanced inside, and I think he immediately battles Avonte Maddox for that starting role. New defensive coordinator Vic Fangio will absolutely love this chess piece now at his disposal, and he'll also be an upgrade for them in the return game. Late third round, Jalix Hunt, the Houston Christian edge, a lot less heralded prospect from a school that many may have never even heard of, but became a hot name during the pre-draft process. Long athlete with an 83-inch wingspan and room to fill out his frame, while having put together a tremendous combine performance, testing in the 80th percentile or better across the board other than the bench press. Has the sudden hands and short area agility to sidestep blockers, along with the quick acceleration to create early run stops, while as a pass rusher he combines an explosive first step with twitchiness to cross-face tackles, hit counters, and just the level of activity to find escape paths. His hand placement in order to maximize his length definitely needs work, and whether he's freelancing in the run game or just doesn't fully grasp how to set up his rushers, he's not there yet. From the limited tape I had access to, I didn't really see him dominate the lower level of competition, and then his lack of size certainly showed up during Senior Bowl practices. So this was definitely early for me. I know some people like Daniel Jeremiah really bought into the potential here, and if there's a team that has the freedom to do so, it's the Eagles with Bryce Huff, Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham, last year's first rounder Nolan Smith. I just think if Sweat and Graham aren't back next year, you bring up Hunt as your third edge rusher, and if he's not ready for that role, you may have to dip into the pool yet again. 4th round, Will Shipley, the Clemson running back, a top 10 back for me in this class. Impressive initial burst and a no-nonsense type of runner who will plow ahead for positive gains, especially in short yardage or goal line situations, able to get low in his cuts to get around defenders one-on-one, or at least slide off glancing shots to great yards after contact, which 60% of his totals over the last 2 seasons came in that capacity according to PFF. And then I believe he's a really useful receiver, being able to win on option routes against linebackers, having reliable hands, and the way he sets up screenplays. His missed tackle force rate did drop off recently, where he's not the most dynamic abrupt mover, and he desperately lacks long speed to finish off plays, along with having fumbled 7 total times over the last 2 years. But I think this presents the opportunity for Philly to throw out some really cool pony personnel packages with Shipley and Saquon potentially. I think he's someone who can take on lead duties if he has to, although he'll leave things to be desired in terms of true explosiveness, but certainly a productive player when given opportunities. The rest of the picks I'll run through a little bit quicker here. Anaya Smith, the Texas A&M wide receiver, former running back convert who does his best work with the ball in his hands, whether it's handed, thrown or kicked to him, sudden in and out of his breaks as a receiver when he's working against man coverage, understands where to find soft spots versus zone, showcases impressive body control, and only dropped 1 of 54 catchable targets last season, while certainly checking the box that says moves different as a run after catch specialist. On the smaller end, where he can struggle against physicality during the route or at the catch point, has a tendency of freelancing a little bit too much as a route runner, and last season he didn't take nearly good enough care of the ball, fumbling 5 times across 85 all-purpose touches. Kind of your Paris Campbell insurance, who is signing free agency as the number 3, and I think could replace that role next season, considering they were used in similar dimensions, even though Campbell may have shown some more long speed at Ohio State. And I'll jump ahead by a round to get to a very different receiver in Johnny Wilson from Florida State. 6'6", 230 pounds with the largest wingspan ever measured for a wide receiver at the combine, but he ran in the low 4.5s and had an awesome shuttle time, backing up that I think the tight end conversation was always ridiculous. You watch him and Keon Coleman on the Seminole offense, who went 30 for the wall to Buffalo. This guy separated way much more regularly, being able to reduce that height and snap off routes effectively, along with having the frame and skills to box out down the field or drag tackles along after the catch. He does lack the top end speed to actually detach from vertical routes, and his foot quickness to pair with the strength in his upper body to win cleanly against press is something that he still needs to work on, but the big one for him is body catching or just not having his hands aligned properly, dropping more than 10% of his passes every year. But still, this was a top 100 player for me, and someone who I believe can be a legit starter in 11 personnel, especially if deployed more as a big slot, so awesome value at this point. Jeremiah Trotter Jr., the Clemson linebacker, I'm guessing all Eagles fans are familiar with his dad having been a Pro Bowler at that position for them before. Really instinctive, well-schooled run defender, is proactive with the way he punches and releases from blocks, active communicator in zone coverage, who tracks the quarterback's eyes and immediately gets into pursuit mode once the ball leaves his hand. And then he's a savvy blitzer who'll drop a shoulder into running back on one snap and then slide inside of them as he overset on him during the next encounter. Too often he's just a step late to the ball and playing alongside a guy in Barry Carter for Clemson, whom we run in the 4.4s when he's coming out next year. That difference in speed was apparent, probably limited in terms of the types of receiving threats you can match him up with one-on-one, and the shorter arms limited his tackling radius. But you can see the NFL bloodlines, and even if this is largely a 2-down player at the next level according to some people, this is an easy pick to make that late. Personally, I believe he can absolutely stay on the field in drop-back settings because of what he provides as a pressure player primarily, and if Devin White or Nakobe Dean continue to struggle, I wouldn't be shocked if he steps in eventually. And then the 2 interior linemen that I haven't gotten to yet, Trevor Keegan from Michigan, built like a brick wall with a rugged style of play, being able to blow defensive tackles off the landmarks and down blocks, or take on a variety of assignments as a puller. Packs the type punch and pass pro combined with a strong base and busy eyes when occupied, but does play very top heavy in both the run and pass game, certainly has room to improve how he latches and sustains against defenders, while he may have issues trying to mirror quick active rushers on the interior. And then the other guy, Dylan McMahon out of NC State, who is much more in the mold of Jason Kelsey and Cam Jurgens, who will place him at center this season. On the smaller end, at right around 300 pounds, which shows up in the way he has to shift his weight forward trying to create momentum in the run game, while he tends to stop his feet throwing 200 punches and doesn't have the firmest grip in pass pro, but urgent out of his stance, being able to execute backside cutoffs, climb up of combos in coordinated fashion, or get on his horse in the screen game, keeps his elbows in tight and lifts from the ground up in pass pro, while you see some highly impressive moments of recovering as he gets caught in suboptimal positions. Only 1 sack allowed each of the past 2 years on nearly 800 pass blocking snaps, So 2 depth pieces that were pretty much in line with where I valued them and they needed here, considering some of the young guys they already had there are now asked to step into more prominent roles, especially with McMahon having starting experience at all 3 interior spots, as Matt Hennessy is the only interior guy that they had in the second string with any playing experience almost. Eagles general manager Howie Roseman catches a lot of flack, it feels like, from people around the league. When you look at how some of those picks up high have worked out, they're closer to in line with NFL average than truly at the top of the game, as they select a lot of names that were highest in consensus boards when they were on the clock. But I think it's a viable strategy anyway, as long as you understand when it's time to trust your evaluations, to move along the board or get a guy you believe in like Jalen Hunt. Even if I personally didn't think he was a day 2 player, they didn't shy away from spending even further resources on a corner room that had aged quickly with those 2 picks up high. They added another running back to the stable who I think can be very useful, got a couple of intriguing skill sets at wide receiver on day 3, and improved the depth on the interior O-line. I think another excellent class for Philly, and if you don't like it, don't let the good players fall to them. So while they did move up 10 spots in the second round for the Gene, Howie was piling up 2025 draft picks already, a 3rd rounder from Miami for a 4th rounder this year, a 4th from Detroit as part of a deal that allowed them to move up 32 spots in the middle of day 3, and a 5th from Houston for simply moving back 4 spots in the 4th round. So really loading up on that mid-round capital for next year, despite a really strong collection of players that they put together here. And I could kind of go on a tangent here about future draft resources, how they're being undervalued, but also how it's connected to job security. Obviously with the leadership structure in Philadelphia, at least in terms of owner to general manager, how he has that ability to be able to make those type of deals. Some other people may not be able to just because they don't have that security long term. Which brings us to our final team of today, the Washington Commanders, who just made a switch at the general manager and head coach position. Let me quickly run through the picks. 1st round, 2nd overall Jaden Daniels, quarterback LSU. 3 second rounders, 36th overall Jer'Zhan Newton, interior D lineman Illinois. 54th overall Mike Sanderstill, cornerback Michigan. And 53rd overall Ben Sinnott, tight end Kansas State. 2 3rd rounders, 67th overall Brandon Coleman, offensive tackle / interior O-lineman TCU. And 100th overall, so the last pick of day 2, Luke McCaffrey, wide receiver Rice. 2 5th rounders, 139th overall Jordan McGee, linebacker Temple. And 161st overall Dominic Hampton, safety Washington. And then in the 7th round, 222nd overall Javonte Jean-Baptiste, edge out of Notre Dame. Of course, starting with Jaden's 2nd overall, I've been vocal about how I thought North Carolina's Drake May was the clear QB2 in this class, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot to get excited about obviously, with the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. Despite having that lanky build, packs a pretty compact release, clean repeatable mechanics, hitting the bullseye with regularity when he operates on time, and being flexible on his arm to deliver throws on the move. One of the best vertical passes we've seen in college football in recent years, where his highlight reel is just loaded with those slot fade routes that he perfectly drops into the bucket for those 2 first-round receivers. And while he's willing to sit in clean pockets, this guy's instant explosiveness when he does take off, the subtle adjustments on the fly without losing speed, and the top gear he has to pull off 70-yard touchdown runs in the SEC are truly special. Now, there are 3 things I really worry about here. He's never attacked the middle of the field at a rate close to what we typically see in the NFL as a 5-year starter. Insanely high pressure to sack conversion rate for his career, as he drops his eyes when there's heat coming in, and isn't actually a secondary play creator, and he's Johnny Knoxville out there with the way he runs into much bigger defenders, when he's actually skinnier than RG3 back in the day for Washington even. So I think there are legit concerns, and I question if Cliff Kingsbury, as the new offensive coordinator, can get the best out of him. But I do certainly like the types of receivers they have around him, in an offense that will either be taking shots down the field, or has Daniels running against space that they created in spread out looks, with softer box counts. As we think about Kingsbury, the best stuff that he actually did in Arizona, at least later on, was the creativity in the run game, at least assuming that Daniels can stay healthy. Then Washington had 3 picks in the 2nd round, starting with bolstering the defense with Johnny Newton, the D-tackle of Illinois, my number 1 interior D-lineman and 13th overall prospect, but I'm still shocked he fell to the 2nd round, even understanding that he needed surgery on his foot, but should be available by week 1. This guy's a bowling ball of butcher knives, who constantly seems to be disrupting plays as a presence in the offensive backfield, who can either slice through lanes or back up blockers, very advanced in his hand combats, and the fluidity at which he can pull off different moves, while being able to take advantage of guards oversetting him with quick arm overs. And the 2 things I love about him, the way he corners his rushes and actually gets his hips pointed towards the quarterback after sidestepping linemen, and then the speed in pursuits after those scrambling guys. On the shorter end of NFL interior D linemen, with his 76-inch wingspan putting him in the 6th percentile for the position, giving him less room for error, and at times seems to be oblivious to angular blocks, while he allows himself to get washed on the line. But man, this is a massive steal at the top of the 2nd round in my book, largely based on dealing with that foot injury I mentioned that didn't allow him to participate in any pre-draft activities, and people nitpicking him. Surprising that Washington was the team who ended the fall, considering they have the Bam Boys on the inside with Deron Payne and John Allen, but the latter of those has a $25 million cap hit next year, and maybe they end up moving him for extra picks, while being able to kick ass this year with the room they have assembled for now. Then Mike Sainristil, who was a standout nickel for Michigan these last 2 years. As I referenced already, moving down 10 spots here in a trade with the Eagles, and I saw some comments following the stupid narrative of not dealing with the division rivals and sort of handing them players. If you look at any type of trade value chart, climbing up 25 spots from 78th to 53rd overall clearly surpassed value on Washington's side, while the difference by 9 spots towards the end of round 5 is pretty much negligible. It feels more like the Eagles saying, we do want something back though, and we can argue how big a gap there is between Cooper DeJean at 40 and Sainristil 10 spots leader, but they both will play the same spot for Washington at the nickel most likely. As for the stud from Michigan, versatile matchup piece who has experience at multiple different spots, with confident click and close skills if asked to play off man, instinctive as his own defender, and has an excellent understanding for spacing, where his eyes should progress through concepts and arrive at the ball, which is how he ended up with 6 PBUs and interceptions each last season, including 2 return for touchdowns, with 1 closing out the national championship game. And then he's a tremendous run defender, being able to play through blocks with extension, finding paths to get around bodies, and arrive low as a tackler. He just gets caught cheating inside and allows opportunities for the ball to bounce around him at times, and savvy route runners can hit him with some trigger steps to get Sainristil off balance in order to create separation. The Commanders did draft Quan Martin out of Illinois last year, who I really like, so maybe they put him in the spot left behind by free agent Cam Curl deep, because you're not drafting this kid if you don't want him to start in the slot for you. He's plug and play and has room upwards, with only 2 years since he transitioned from wide receiver. And completing the trio of 2nd rounders, Ben Sinnott from Kansas State, my number 3 tight end in this class, and the round where I valued him, was used in a variety of ways, playing inline, the slot, wing and fullback, where he has natural leverage and a powerful lower body to dig out defenders at 6'3", 250 pounds. For more of that stocky build, he has pretty snappy hips at the breakpoint and adjusts his routes accordingly to the coverage he's facing. Consistent overhand technique to catch pretty much everything thrown his way, tough to affect the catch point against him trying to reach around him, and he's going to drag people along with the ball in his hands. Only has 32.5-inch arms, which limit his reach as a blocker and his catch radius, and he's not going to split safeties as a seam runner or turn a flat route into a long touchdown necessarily. But I talked about Sinnott as one of my guys in a video a couple of months ago by now, as someone who projects really well as an H-back and movable piece. Washington did sign Zach Ertz this offseason, so we could see some more 12 personnel sets, but I think by 2025, he's the official starter and becomes an integral piece to the offense, whether he leads the way for his new quarterback in key plays, or fights for a key first down when the defense lets him catch the ball short of the sticks initially. Then Brandon Coleman, the offensive lineman from TCU, features tackle measurements combined with guard power in the run game, where he can talk defenders out of the lane, able to gather and position himself in front of bodies on the 2nd level in order to wall them off effectively, and has that massive frame that makes it tough for pass rushers to get around him, being able to absorb force with his hands, and you're just not going through this guy when he has his cleats in the ground. Doesn't consistently enforce his will in the run game by accelerating into contact, where he can get pretty top heavy and heavy footed, while his pressure and penalty numbers were higher than you'd like to see, kind of extending his arms and catching rushers too much. Maybe they'll look at him as an option left tackle, in an offense that gets the ball quicker, and they just want Jaden to have space to release cleanly, since that's the spots they really need the most help. I really like Coleman. This was early for me even, and I looked at him as a guard primarily, who can kick outside in the pinch, but they did spend money on Nick Allegretti at guard, and Sam Cosmi has been his best at right guard, but maybe the latter as a former left tackle at Texas goes back there, and then I all of a sudden really like that lineup a lot more. Luke McCaffrey, the Rice wide receiver. I talked about this one in more detail when I mentioned McCaffrey as a reach in my big draft recap. In the draft with name value, with all these sons and brothers getting picked, it didn't hold as much weight necessarily, but Christian's brother I thought definitely received a bump. He's only been playing receiver for a couple of years after transitioning from quarterback, and has already shown that he's quite a natural at some of the details of the position, comes off the ball with his pads over his knees, shows instinctive adjustments in his routes, extends for the ball away from his frame, and he's really tough holding onto the ball through some jarring hits. I just think his stem setup needs some work. He's not overly dynamic in the way he sticks his foot in the ground and can burst out of there. Too much chopping of his feet, and while the Rice passing game, relying on him as heavily as it did, was a big reason for it, 10 interceptions by his quarterback throwing McCaffrey's way. I think you can develop into a number 3, but I didn't love the pick to close out day 2. I was much higher on Jordan McGee, the Tampa linebacker, who I had number 8 in my positional rankings of the entire draft. Always plays with that aggressive mindset, using those long arms to attack linemen, even despite only being 225 pounds, and has the short area burst to beat them to a spot. Light on his feet in coverage, smooth in the way that he flips those hips around to transition to secondary targets or carries routes vertically, and he flies up into the flats in a hurry when the ball is checked down. And then his closing burst as a blitzer is just phenomenal, where he can dip that shoulder, and if you don't slide in front of him in time, he'll run down your quarterback in a hurry. Does present a rather slender build without much density, and plays a little taller than you'd like to see to be as efficient as he could be at redirecting coverage, and tends to gamble on cutback lanes or runs himself out of the picture at this point too much. But I fell in love with this kid's tape, and in a linebacker class that lacks dynamism, his ability to close that gap when the ball gets out to the perimeter, somebody has a step on him in coverage, or he hunts down a quarterback outside the pocket, it really pops. They brought in Frankie Louvu as a hybrid player in the front 7, and Bobby Wagner as a more steady presence at Mike, to go along with Jamin Davis as a former first rounder a couple of years ago. But as the latter is on the last year of his rookie deal, and B-Wax is probably just here for 2024 as well, I could absolutely see McGee bulk up a little bit, and then start for this team next year. Quickly on the last 2 guys, Dominic Hampton, the Washington safety in the 5th, big safety at 6'2", 215 pounds, with a pretty even split between deep safety, box in the slot, urgently works downhill against the run and hits with his chest, moves around in space pretty well and takes excellent angles, while he can match up with tight ends, with how well he reads route stems and bumps guys off track. He got to read route breaks from a lot of flat-footed positions, and I'd be concerned with him having to play off, flip and run with guys in legit man coverage against slot receivers, and there's some tightness having to make more abrupt adjustments, or bring down dynamic ball carriers in the open field. Could be a core special teamer, and end up competing for snaps in the safety room without proving commodities beyond Derek Forrest. And Javonte Jean-Baptiste, the Notre Dame edge, well-built the end who started his career at Ohio State before transferring to Notre Dame to get more extensive playing time, has nearly 34-inch arms and a strong upper body to lock out and take advantage of blockers, getting off balance in the run game. That ability to work the hands, find escape paths, and chase down quarterbacks got him a lot of wins later in the down. He needs to learn how to deconstruct blocks and actually make plays more frequently in the run game. And then as a pass rusher, that second and third step up the arc, and how he threatens the edge of pass protectors, leaves you wanting more. In the mold of what they like, looking at the guys they've brought in this offseason to add some competition on the edge. What I appreciate about what they did here is this Commanders brass realizing they're starting fresh here and should not allow what's on the roster currently hinder them from getting the best football players. You see that in getting Johnny Newton despite already having an interior D-line that may be the biggest strength for the team. Mike Sainristil still is an awesome nickel and tone setter for that unit of Dan Quinn. Benson Out and Jordan McGee were 2 of my personal highlights, as guys I discussed on multiple occasions during the process, along with a couple of solid depth pieces late. As I already discussed, I disagree with the quarterback evaluations, and I thought the name value of Luke McCaffrey led to them taking him too early, but all in all I definitely like what Washington did here, with Adam Peters in his first season as general manager, and Quinn getting his second shot at running a team from a coaching perspective, as they brought over some luggage from Dallas, and went quite heavy on defense in this draft. Of course, whether Jaden or Drake May become franchise quarterbacks will determine most where this franchise is headed. Concluding now with my divisional draft rankings, I have the Eagles at the top once again. It was a lot closer in years past, but they got 2 of my top 5 defensive backs with picks 22 and 40, when that was a major area they needed to address. A gamble on trades with Jalex Hunt at the end of the 3rd round, a little early for me, but then I thought they found offensive contributors on day 3 who offer different skill sets, a linebacker that may not be a premier athlete, but sees the game so well that I believe he can be a starter in this league, and restocked the depth on the interior line. Several value picks throughout, including a couple of guys from the final day, who I had about 100 spots high in my personal rankings. Howie gets too much hate, as he puts together another tremendous class. Then I'll put the Giants second, would be at the top in many other divisions. Other than the final pick I would consider special team only, and Andrew Phillips being a few spots earlier than where I had him personally, they got surplus value on each of the other 4 selections that they made. They got a superstar receiver in Neighbors, a top-ranked safety who immediately becomes a key figure in the defense with the coordinator change, And then I think they got themselves a starting tight end and running back for 2025 in the 4th and 5th round respectively. Lots riding on this here for Daniel Jones, Brian Daboll, Joe Shane and the G-Man, but they got great young talent to infuse some energy into this operation. Washington's third for me. We've discussed my stance on May over Daniels as QB2, and that'll be a big deciding factor as we look back at this draft a year or even 3 years from now, but I won't allow that to affect my opinion on everything else that they did. Like some other analysts out there, especially when it comes to the trade back with the Eagles, a stupid narrative that really annoys me, saying some team gifted a player to his rival, as if they didn't get resources back in return. The new regime of Adam Peters, Dan Quinn and company did not allow what they already had in place to hold them back from getting the best football players available across days 2 and 3, and while they made a couple of questionable decisions in the 3rd round, I thought they made up for it otherwise. Which leaves us with Dallas at the bottom here. I thought they clearly reached on 2 of the 4 picks inside the top 100, with a developmental tackle and a linebacker who doesn't play up to his physical capabilities, for a team that supposedly isn't a championship window. Generally a pretty strong drafting team, while it's usually the other stuff, not taking care of your homegrown talent early and basically doing nothing in free agency with the idea of being all in, that kind of bothers me. Now, I don't love what you did with half of your premium picks, even if I think they found themselves potential future starters with the others. You don't excite me with your day 3 output, and you don't even take any shot at running back because you've got Zeke on a redemption tour in your back pocket. I'm just not convinced. But that's gonna do it for today, leaving on a bit of a sour note. But whether you're a Cowboys fan or not, I hope you enjoyed the analysis. If you did, letting me know by hitting the thumbs up button, and maybe subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so yet, would mean a lot to me. NFC and AFC North editions are already out, and we'll be switching back to the American Conference, looking at a fascinating foursome in the NFC East on Friday. Let me know if you have any thoughts or questions down below in the comments. Feel free to check out all of my content at hellofootballtalk.com and or follow me on social media. Links for all of that are down below in the description. Hope to see you back here on Friday. So until then, see you later. Peace!